Well, we continue on in our series here, Navigate, looking at the book of Proverbs. We have seen how wisdom is essential, how foolishness is dangerous, how our words are loaded, how money is powerful. And today we are looking at a very important topic. Laziness is tempting. And just before I jump into things, I'm always indebted to a variety of resources that I use to glean truth so that I can put messages together. And this morning, not this morning, but this week, there's a variety of other resources that I didn't even touch because I had too many things, but I made them available via some handouts. And so at the end of the service today, if this is something that you say, man, I need to just keep working at this, there's a couple of handouts on the tables, two different ones that you can get for your ongoing learning and growing experience there. And of all the topics that we've covered so far, frankly, this one has really been convicting to me over the course of my study as it pertains to this topic of laziness. You know, there's a common question that we ask, how are you? And how do we answer that? Or what do we hear oftentimes when we say, how are you? What do we hear? We hear, well, I'm fine, good, all right. And I think one answer that we hear a lot is busy, man, just busy. And let's face it, we are busy people. And yet, with reference to that, I'm finding it fascinating that this topic of laziness might cause us to say, how in the world can that be applicable to us if we're so busy? Well, frankly, laziness might be more applicable to our busy lives than we really might think. And as I mentioned, this has just really been convicting to me. And as we go through it this morning, it might be convicting to you. I was reminded of a pastor friend of mine who used to say this, if the shoe fits, may God give you the grace to kick yourself with it. And so, as we go through this, let's let the Lord speak to us, because what we don't want is this to be our legacy. One night I had a wondrous dream. One set of footprints there was seen, the footprints of my precious Lord, but mine were not along the shore. But then some stranger prints appeared, and I asked the Lord, what have we here? Those prints are large and round and neat, but Lord, they are too big for feet. My child, he said in somber tones, for miles I carried you alone. I challenged you to walk in faith, but you were lazy and made me wait. You disobeyed, you would not grow. The walk of faith you would not know. So I got tired, I got fed up, and there I dropped you on your butt. Because in life, there comes a time when one must fight and one must climb, when one must rise and take a stand or leave their butt prints in the sand. Who wants that legacy? We don't want that to be our legacy. And so the question is, well, what is laziness? And what's fascinating is in the book of Proverbs, laziness is not so much defined as it is described. And it is described by being personified in a person that is called the sluggard. What is the sluggard like? Well, Ray Ortlund has a good definition of what the sluggard is like when he wrote this. Think of the way syrup oozes slowly out of a bottle when it is cold. That is a sluggard. Sluggish and slow and hesitant when he should be decisive, active, forthright. His life motto is, don't rush me. He's lazy, constantly making the soft choice, losing one opportunity after another, after another, after another, every day, moment by moment, until he lies there helpless in his wasted life. Let's all admit it. There's a sluggard deep inside each of us. This morning the question is this: is there a sluggard deep inside of us? Is there a sluggard deep inside of me? How can I know if I'm a sluggard? Well, what we're going to explore this morning are 4 characteristics of laziness, 4 characteristics of that person that Proverbs unpacks for us called the sluggard. And these characteristics are taught all through the book of Proverbs, and so we're going to look at them through a myriad of passages. And you can see here the first characteristic of a sluggard is that he procrastinates. It's interesting. Procrastination. 5 syllables. It even takes a long time to say it. It's all about the fact that the procrastinator excels in putting things off, and as a result, rarely finishes things. Here's some passages that we see illustrating his life. The first one there in chapter 12, verse 27. The lazy man does not roast what he took in hunting, but diligence is man's precious possession. A true sportsman, when he talks about hunting, he talks about harvesting. They're harvesting these animals in light of using them. But here what we see is that the sluggard here in procrastination, he likes to hunt, but then he wastes it. He doesn't harvest it for his benefit. His ambition is devoid of hard work. And the result is 19:15 there. Laziness casts one into a deep sleep, and an idle person will suffer hunger. Why? Because he's in a habit of playing when he should be working. Note chapter 20 there in verse 4 where it says this, sluggards do not plow in season, so at harvest time they look, but find nothing. You see, the sluggard tricks himself into thinking, if I can just put this off, it'll somehow make me happier. But what he doesn't know is that delayed obedience only produces prolonged pain. He or she procrastinates so much that they actually fall in love with sleep. So much so that if you venture into their bedroom, you'd think that they were hinged to their bed. We see that in Proverbs 26, verse 14. As a door turns on its hinges, so does the lazy man on his bed. He's so hesitant, or I should say resistant to working hard, he chooses again and again to just roll over in bed, always turning but never moving. Do you tend to procrastinate? You see, here's the fact. When I procrastinate, here's what I do. I actually invite anxiety into my life. When I procrastinate, I'm opening the doors to anxiety into my life, because no unpleasant task becomes any less unpleasant by putting it off. What? Putting it off never puts it away. You just hate mowing your grass. And after several weeks, it starts looking like the Amazon jungle, and it just plagues your mind. It's always back there. You need to update your will, or have your will written, or update your insurance policies, and it's just always living there as an unwelcome guest in your mind. It doesn't leave you, or maybe that lump that you've had for some time now, and you know that you need to make an appointment to get that checked up, but you're just constantly procrastinating, and yet it lives in the back of your mind. And so I think as we look at this first point, the question is simply this: are there things in your life that you need to do that you ought to make a plan to accomplish over the course of this next week even? Procrastination, first mark of a sluggard. Next mark of laziness that we see is not only procrastination, but excuses. Excuses. And note what we see here in 2 very similar verses in 2 different parts of the book, where it says this. The sluggard says, "There's a lion outside." I shall be killed in the streets. And then in 26:13, the lazy man says, there's a lion in the road. A fierce lion is in the streets. Well, how's this relate to excuses? Well, what this does is these verses give us a look inside the sluggard's brain and how we can see how he thinks. So what the sluggard does is that he wakes up in the morning after hitting the snooze button 27 times, and he finally pulls himself out of bed, and he starts getting ready for work, and he thinks, oh man, I really don't want to go to work today. I think I'm just gonna call in, and I'm just gonna stay home and binge on Netflix today, and stay in bed and eat a tub of Perry's mint tingling ice cream. Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. And so he calls his boss and he says, hey, I'm not coming in to work today. And so the boss says, well, why? And he says, there's a lion in the streets and I can't get out of my house. It's like, what? It's ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. And that's exactly the point of this illustration here. It's a ridiculous excuse. The point is this: to prove how ridiculous our excuses are, and they don't work. The sluggard is so consumed with his cravings, he will make any excuse, no matter how far-fetched, in order to get what he wants. Now, don't we tend to do the same? You know, it's so easy to make excuses, to avoid what we dislike so that we can live a life of ease and comfort. From chores to unpleasant, hard conversations we need to have. From our excuse to avoid a lack of regular exercise or eating habits that would be better. We're all very creative in creating excuses in order to get out of uncomfortable situations. Someone put it this way: the sluggard deceives himself by the smallness of his surrenders. You see, here's the question I think we all need to ask, and it's simply this: how am I currently using excuses to avoid hard work? You know, what about that hard conversation that you know you need to have? And if I can encourage you about hard conversations, it's been my experience that in light of hard conversations, if you really pray it through, and if you really approach that situation with a humble heart and seek first to understand before you're understood and carry that through in a gracious manner, I found a lot of those hard conversations really turn out to be not that very hard at all. Let me encourage you about that. What about that job that you know you need to show up at, but you just keep avoiding and come up with excuse after excuse not to go in? You know, Pastor Jeff last week talked about money, your need to get your financial house in order, your need to, you know, like I said, you know, have a will drawn up or to update your will. Things like that, you know. Do you have a PhD in excuse making to avoid the wisdom of regular exercise and good diet habits so that you can live wisely and with grace and beauty and the skill of life to maximize this body that God has blessed you with so that you can glorify Him in? Kids, how about you? Are you an excuse factory when it comes to, you know, doing chores? Oh, I can't do, my legs hurt, you know. Oh, I can't pick up my toys, my arms are wiggling, you know. You're always making excuses about why you can't do what you need to do, what your mom and dad are telling you to do, you know. I'll tell you what, man, here's where I was really good at excuses when I was a kid. School. schoolwork. I was the worst student in the world, clear up to my senior year in high school. Things finally started to click. But man, I was lazy as the day is long in school. And I'm not giving myself as a good example, kids, here at all. Okay, but I was just lazy. I remember I think it's 5th grade, she would assign this page of division problems. There were 75 division problems in it. I hated it. I would sit there and cry. She'd make us do this, 75 of these division problems. And I remember I could care less. I would just put wrong numbers down there just to finish the thing. I was lazy, coming up with excuses to do the hard work of paying attention. But you know what I was really good at, kids? Here's what I was really good at. I was really good at daydreaming. One of my teachers even one time wrote on it, Donnie has a problem with daydreaming. Because, I would much rather be there in class fighting wild animals like Tarzan did in the jungles of Africa and being a real hero in my mind and working hard at what I needed to work at. Man, kids, don't let yourself go there. And listen, kids, if you have a mom and dad who are on you, working hard to help you to learn how to pay attention, like I've said before, you ought to thank your lucky stars that you have a mom and dad who's cracking the whip. Why? Because they know there's a sluggard deep down inside of you, and they don't want you to be a slave to that sluggard your whole life. Today's excuses are tomorrow's regrets in disguise. Proficiency in excuse making ends up wasting our lives in a spectacularly non-scandalous fashion so that we don't see how destructive making excuses really is. Well, what else do we see here in light of the characteristics of laziness, procrastination, excuses, and then third here, cares too much about the unessential. Where do we see that? Well, 2 particular verses here, Proverbs 12, verse 11. Those who work their land will have abundant food, but those who chase, and here's our word, fantasies, have no sense. 28:19. Whoever works his land will have plenty of bread, but he who follows, same word as fantasies, worthless pursuits will have plenty of poverty. Those words, fantasies and worthless, are both the same words that refer to that which is vain, that which is empty. It's nothing. You see, the point here is this: the sluggard neglects the essential for the unessential. See, the problem is not that he's doing evil, wicked things. On the contrary, the sluggard places disproportionate amount of time, energy, and resources on things that just don't matter most. His priorities are not bad, they're just not best. And that's the danger and just how easy it is to fritter our lives away. I'll tell you what is a real encouragement to us as pastors is to see how many people along the way have enrolled and even completed our counseling training who are retired, they have finished one career or are on the verge of it, and they realize that there's more of life behind them than there is ahead of them. And what they really want to do in this remaining portion of life is make their life count and matter in the only thing that you can do in taking you things with you to heaven, and that's people. And that's a great blessing to see people, getting that in those retirement, those latter years, they're not just about getting a better tan or, hitting a white ball around a green golf course, And listen, I love golf. I like to play golf. And is it evil to want to get better at your golf game? No, that's not it. But listen, don't let that be the only reason why you golf. Let the reason be that you golf so that you can be more like Jesus to your golf buddies and point them to Jesus. That's what it's about. You see, someone said this: our greatest fear should not be of failure, but of succeeding at things in life that just really don't matter. Well, here's a question that I think is helpful for us. How do I know if I care too much about the unessential? Well, here's some things to think about. First of all, am I successful at work but failing at home? Am I successful at work but failing at home? Do I invest as much time, thought, and energy into my marriage, into my family, as I do at work? You know, am I Dr. Jekyll at work but Mr. Hyde at home? You know, you can get another job, but you can't get another family. And don't allow yourself to succeed at work but fail at home. And it's so easy for us, especially as men, to get our priorities screwed up and to be guilty of just this very thing. Well, here's another question to ask. Do I have a clean house but a neglected soul? Am I all about expending my time and energy into having an HGTV home and little about putting time and energy into my walk with God? As someone put it, do we have clean counters but dusty Bibles? Well, here's another thing. Am I virtually present but physically absent? What do I mean by that? Well, am I rich in followers on Instagram and Twitter, but impoverished with meaningful, real relationships? You know, do I spend time polishing my image online to the neglect of engaging with real, live people? It's important. Well, fourth characteristic of laziness that we see throughout the book of Proverbs is not only that it's marked by procrastination, excuses, cares too much about the unessential, but cares too little about the essential. You see, what we see in Proverbs 24, verse 30 through 34, here the wise person details what he learns from observing the sluggard. So let's take a look at what the wise person observes about the sluggard. I passed by the field of a sluggard, by the vineyard of a man lacking sense. And behold, it was all overgrown with thorns. The ground was covered with nettles, and its stone wall was broken down. Then I saw and considered it. I looked and received instruction, a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come upon you like a robber, and want like an armed man. What's happening here? Well, the wise person here, he's wondering how his neighbor is doing. And so he hops in his chariot and he drives over to his house. And as he comes up to his house, he's stunned. That's that word, behold. He's stunned at what he sees. And those words, thorns and nettles, those are theological terms you don't think are theological that echo clear back to Genesis chapter 3. Whereupon Adam and Eve's failure to listen to the voice of God and obey him, rather obeying the word of the serpent, or by obeying the word of the serpent, they could become wise, they could become shrewd. What happens is that they realize that they weren't shrewd at all, but they were nude. And what happened then is the curse that comes down on the fact that now their work is going to be marked by thorns and nettles. A sign of judgment on the rebellion for the refusal to truly be wise. See, here's the principle. Lazy people neglect the essential and inherit unavoidable consequences that make life harder. Here's the question. What are the essential and necessary things of life that we don't want to neglect? What are they? Where can I learn them? Well, we can learn them best from the words of Jesus himself, where here's what he said in Luke chapter 10 and then Mark chapter 8. Know what he said in Luke 10? But the Lord answered her, Martha, Martha, you are anxious and troubled about many things, but one thing is necessary. Here's what's essential. Mary has chosen the good portion, which will not be taken away from her. What was that? Just sitting at the feet of Jesus. And then he says in Mark 8, for what will it profit a man if he gains the entire world and loses his own soul? You see, here's what's important. The greatest characteristic of the sluggard, the greatest characteristic of the lazy person is not that he procrastinates. It's not that he makes excuses. It's not that he cares too much about the unessential, but rather it's that he cares too little about his soul. That's the greatest mark of the sluggard. And so the question simply is this, man, has that been all too true of us of late? You see, is it way too easy to run into your to-do list than to run into your time with the Lord every day? Charles Haddon Spurgeon put it this way, we are busy about 1,000 things, but sluggish about our souls. Or someone else put it, beware of the busyness of the barren life and the barrenness of the busy life. And here's my challenge. For the next 30 days, I want to encourage you to find a place, find a time every day to practice the ordinary means of time with God. And again, as we've challenged you, just even start with the book of Proverbs, 31 chapters, one proverb, one chapter for each day, and spend time meditating it and see what God will do through your life doing that. Just yesterday, my wife said, she said, I read Proverbs chapter 17 this morning, and it helped me understand, I'm not going to do what I was thinking of doing in light of whatever it was that we were talking about. It was just by spending time in the Word. God gave her clarity for needed direction in her life. And that's what spending regular time with God does as we care for our souls. Don't trade in your soul for 1,000 non-essential things this week. And so the question is this, is there a sluggard deep inside of you that you procrastinate, make excuses, care too much about the unessential and care too little about the essential? If your answer to that is yes, there is good news for you. Because the message of the gospel is this, is that Jesus redeems lazy people. That's the message of the gospel. How is that? He does it by living the life that they could have lived and living the life that they should have lived in their place. And this is why we need the local church, especially because this is why we need to be reminded in light of all of the situations and the negativity that's going on in our culture right now. The good news of the gospel is that Jesus is not like us, and that is good news, especially when it comes to laziness. We procrastinate so that we can do what we want. But Jesus says in John 6, "For I have come down from heaven, not to do my own will, but the will of him who sent me." We make excuses to avoid hard things. But in Jesus, it says in Hebrews chapter 12, he endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. And we neglect essential things, and we seldom finish what we start. But as we sung that great song this morning, Jesus always finishes what he starts. He is the author and finisher of our faith. And being confident, as it says in Philippians 1, being confident of this very thing, that he who has begun a good work in you will complete it until the day of Christ Jesus. In every way that we fail, that we blow it, Jesus succeeds. He lived a life that we could not. He died in our place. He rose again to give us new life so that we could join him now in the greatest work of all, and that is spreading the good news of the gospel of hope to broken and needy and lost lives. Because Jesus is the only one who can transform a sluggard and turn him into a soldier. The church is an army telling broken and lost people that Jesus is alive and can forgive and restore their sinful souls. And God help us in the here and now of today if we go AWOL by procrastinating, by making excuses, by frittering our lives away with things that don't really matter. What's the bad news? The bad news is that there is a sluggard in every one of us. Pretend to procrastinate. We make excuses. We care too much about the unessential. We care too little about the essential. But what's the good news? The good news is this: we can change and have hope because Jesus is not like us. And when we place our faith in him, he invites us to join him in the greatest work of the world, and that is bearing the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ to those who desperately need to hear it. And one day, the Bible tells us that we will finish our work because Jesus finished his. And that is good news for a sluggard. Would you pray with me, please? Father, we're just thankful for the example of your Son for us. And God, this is a very convicting message because it hits all of us. We just can't escape the fact of how deeply this has embedded itself into the fabric of our beings. And God, we need to be a people who are about rescue as Jesus was about rescue. We need to be about what you have called us to be about, more and better followers of you. And Father, we pray that you would bless us with renewed vision to bring balance into our lives where perhaps maybe we're out of balance. And even this morning, for that individual that might be really discouraged from this message, God, I pray that you'd cause them to see, as we've been saying each week, that no matter how many steps we have taken away from God, it only takes one step back. And so might that step of humility be the step that we take in our desire to honor you with lives well lived, wise lives that are lived with a skill of grace and beauty, so that our lives will have accomplished something that is worthwhile. We praise you for that great privilege as we live for Jesus, the one who gave his life for us, and it's in his great name. Amen. Well, again, as we say every week, there's always an open invitation, and you even right now might be facing some hard things, just some things that they are hard. And if there's one thing I don't want to do is to just beat you up with guilt today, because that's not at all our intention. Our intention is to help you to see that there is another choice, and it's God's way. And if we can help you discover what that is as you seek to make wise choices in the days to come, from transitioning to being maybe too much of a sluggard to a wise person, we would love that opportunity. We invite you to get in touch with us at your earliest convenience. Take care. Thanks so much for coming. Have a great day.